Okay, Daniel 11, we're getting towards the end of the book. Another one accomplished. And Daniel 11, I believe, might be the longest chapter in the book. And next week, 12 is the shortest. Definitely longest of the 6 prophetic chapters. So, as we're coming to a close, let's again summarize. The prophetic part is the second half of Daniel. Remember, the first 6 was kind of his life story. The last 6 were his prophecies and vision. I received several dreams, which primarily focus on the Medes and Persians, which came after Babylon, then the kingdom of Greece. And if the first 4 verses of chapter 11, he will again summarize this. So what I was going to do real quick is just summarize the theme of each of these prophetic chapters. Chapter 7. There was the 4 beasts, and he kind of had a vision of what would the near future be. Those beasts were if you remember, the lion, the leopard, the bear, and then an awful beast. So we had 4 beasts here. And the lion, leopard, bear, and beast represented Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greece, Rome. Chapter 8, he had another vision. And this was mainly focusing on the goat and the ram. Goat and ram were 2 of these 4 beasts. Medo-Persia, which had just conquered Babylon, and Greece. We'll put all 4 here. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. All dealing with the near future. Chapter 9, Daniel had the vision of the future of his people and really focused, if you remember, Easter Sunday, what was that, 2 weeks ago, the 70 weeks, where we get a 7-year tribulation period, and future of his people. And then last week, again, Daniel had another major vision that focused mainly on the Medo-Persian Empire. So all kingdoms that were reigning in the next 200 or 300 years after the lifetime of Daniel. In chapter 11, what I found out as I was studying this week, facial, I'm talking to you. There doesn't seem to be any really dramatic in this chapter. It's just an amazing example of Daniel, almost word for word, explaining what's going to be happening in history the next couple of centuries. And it's so accurate, as I said, liberal scholars or secular scholars say just it had to be written later because it's so accurate for telling the future. But we know we serve a God who sees past, present, future, and all those things. So let's look through Daniel 11 and see what he says. First 4 verses. I also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, again, Darius is the one who had him thrown in the lion's den. Even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now while I show thee the truth, behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. Okay, a couple of notes. Who are they talking about here? All right, like I said, Darius is the king of the lion's den. It says 4 kings will succeed him, and it's suggested that the last one is the greatest. And the last of these 4, from my commentaries, most think it was the king who Queen Esther married. So, in Darius' line of succession. So this is all during this same time period. Ezekiel, Daniel, Esther, about the time children of Judah were carried off into captivity. So he is that 4th king here. And then we talk about a mighty king coming. And that, of course, is Alexander the Great, one of the great military leaders in history. And several times is referred to him in the book of Daniel. although once again it's a couple hundred years before he was born. And then it mentions here in the verse we just read, verse 4, and he shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven. So we've had that four theme several places. I looked up two, there might even be a couple more. Daniel 7:6. And after this I behold, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl, and the beast had four heads. And then the next chapter, Daniel 8:8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. And all of these seem to pretty much demonstrate that Alexander the Great, after he died, his kingdom was divided up into fours, and we can see that all throughout the book of Daniel, and once again re-emphasized here. So we've now moved to the kingdom of the Medo-Persians, to the kingdom of Greece. And now for the next few chapters, Daniel's going to go into specific detail of events that are about to occur just over the horizon, or maybe even just a few decades away from the time when he was writing. Okay, verses 5 through 9. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm. Neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of a branch of her root shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives into Egypt their guides with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. So I was reading that, I was like, that was almost like reading history instead of prophecy. And I just, did my little research. And basically what he's going into specific details from the commentaries and things I consulted. The king of the south is Egypt, and the king of the north is the Seleucids, led by Ptolemy. I'm not sure how, you might be a silent P there. I didn't look that up. These describe real events that occurred, but at the time they were still in the future. So even though it's like reading something that's already happened, it hadn't occurred yet. And this Ptolemy's daughter, Bernice, is talking about her. So these actions, these verses describe various wars with specific details. And these occur in the area of the world in the final centuries before the birth of Jesus. So there's a lot happening in this area. First Babylon, then the Medo-Persians, then Greece, Rome. It's all around the Middle East area. And really I believe it's the Lord in his divine sovereignty setting things up for when Jesus does come to earth, so the gospel message can kind of spread out in that direction. So by the time he came, Rome ruled the world and ruled like no other nation in history, but it also connected the world like any place in history, so that way, the gospel message could be spread out and it could go in different directions and so forth. So that's this time period, and this is Daniel, late 500s BC, and the things he's talking about right now around the 200s BC. So still a couple centuries ahead and a couple centuries before the Lord's born. Verse 10 through 13. But his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army, and with much riches. All right. as we're reading, as Daniel's writing, this is prophecy of things that will come to pass. But as we read this, this is not talking about things that still haven't happened yet. These are things that have already happened. So prophecy to him, history to us. So I want to stress that there's a lot of Daniel involved stuff still that hasn't happened yet, but these events have already occurred in this chapter. It continues the theme of this war between the North and the South. Why is Daniel including these events from nations such as is probably Egypt and Syria? For one, they all center around the nations of the earth at this time. And it also demonstrates the power of prophecy. Person is literally like giving revelations he's receiving from God. All right, just imagine, say you picked up a book and give detailed versions of World War II. I think I used an example a couple weeks ago and talks about a man rising up out of Germany and names Hitler, and he begins to conquer nation after nation. At the same time in the Pacific, another nation, Japan, rises up and attacks the United States, and they go to war with both of them in the biggest war in the history of the planet. And at the end, and then you look and you read, and the book was written by prophet so-and-so in the year 1850 or 1865, right after the Civil War. And it would just, blow your mind. But here's what it would do. It would give credibility to that person. You're saying, if this person says that, and everything came to pass just as he said, this person has heard from God. So the thing is, if we're confident that he had done this, and if we found another book and said, prophecies for the 21st century, stuff that hadn't happened yet, we would be pretty confident that as the Lord revealed to those things, he also revealed things to come. And that's kind of what we got Daniel here. If he is just one by one, listed nation by nation, things that are going to happen, and every single thing occurs, as he says, those things in Daniel that have yet to occur, we also can have the utmost confidence that he heard from the Lord, and these things will also happen, which I believe very soon on the horizon where we live at right now. So more prophecies about this time period that Daniel's discussing, once again, around the 200s, 200s BC, 14 through 19. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. And this shall he turn his face into the isles, and he shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. As I've gone through Daniel, in these last few weeks, I've really learned a lot myself, even though I've read it over and over and over again. But the pattern and the prophecies in the first 10 chapters are fairly easy to put together. It surprised me. But this 11th chapter is just seems to be kind of very wordy and thick. And basically, I think it's just describing events, that are occurring in the next few years. And it's just too much into detail to get into, for just a one-chapter summary of all the names and places. But I just want to hammer again on the prophecy theme. Even though these events have happened recently, just continuing that same thing that I just give the example. I suppose you found the book that described, the events of World War II, but it was written in the 19th century. Then you found out that this person had wrote another book and said something, said at the beginning of the next century there will be a major terrorist attack on the United States. And then a couple decades in, a plague that hits the world like we've never seen before, then you'd be like, wow, that's impressive, that's exactly what happened. And then if he says, you know, coming this fall, I'm going to release my next book about the events unfolding in the upcoming years. That'd be in high demand. A lot of people would want to see what's going on here because of the track record of accuracy. And as the Bible says, how do you know if a prophet's heard from the Lord, if what he says comes to pass? So, and this Daniel, of course, stands a test of time above probably anyone else. And that same person said this, a man of sin will be revealed in the last days, which Daniel says, and we know to look for him, who will oppose all that is holy, which Daniel says, he'll attempt to conquer the world, and finally the Lord will return to put an end to this. If this is the vision that the Lord has given Daniel, we can be confident that he did receive it from them. So then the thought comes, what are you going to do about this? You're going to be highly confident, like I said, that these things are going to come to pass. And as Daniel was doing this, and the chapter book concludes, at the end of this chapter, the final few verses, he does describe the reign of the Antichrist, but he still is, as we come up to verse 20, is still talking about events of the near future. Verse 20 through 28. Again, more details about upcoming wars and battles. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. As I'm reading this, it kind of sounds like Antichrist behavior, but in these particular verses, I don't think they're specifically describing the Antichrist. But as you know, in the Bible, there's always a spirit of Antichrist that seems to dwell within wicked people. And there always seems to be some person, sometime during the history of the earth, is doing something that the world has to deal with. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. All right. You know what they're talking about here, and we'll talk about that in a second. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed on the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be due to mischief. They shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. So again, a lot of details there about upcoming events. And the consensus is, who he's talking about here, as we've talked about it in weeks past, Antiochus Epiphanes. And a review, once again, if you'll remember, he is the one who went into the temple of God, put a statue of Zeus in there, sacrificed a pig to intentionally, desecrate it, to do something, to really just put it in their face that he's against the Jewish people. And this happened around 164 BC. This was, again, a time around the times of the Maccabees and their revolt, and from where we get the feast of Hanukkah comes during this time period. So this is a very wicked person, Antiochus Epiphanes. Even some scholars say when Daniel is talking about a future wicked leader that we believe to be the Antichrist, some will say no, they're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes because he was so wicked in the vile things he'd done. But although he did very wicked things, we know still that the events that will occur have not occurred yet, because they're still spoken about in the New Testament Remember when we talked about Matthew 24, Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation is spoken by the prophet Daniel. So if Jesus said it hasn't happened yet, and this event with Antiochus happened before Jesus was born, we know this is an event. What he did, Antiochus, by doing that false desecrating the temple, it's a future preview of what the Antichrist will do someday in the temple. And Paul also warns about the man of sin who is yet to be revealed. So Antiochus, of course, was not the Antichrist. Jesus hadn't even been born yet, but he is like a picture or a prototype of the Antichrist. And it always seems, there's always seems a dictator, and some are quite evil, some are not as bad as others, but they always seem to be focused around God's people. In those times, they were focused upon the nation of Israel, and now they would be more focused on the church. However, we think of also a recent one like Hitler, who rose up, and what was his intention? To destroy the Jewish people. So he knew, this just kind of shows that the enemy doesn't know the plans of God specifically, but he knows vaguely that through, God's people, all the earth will be blessed, and he's always raising up people who are out to get them and to bring them down. And Antiochus is one of the most wicked, and his death was very brutal, and not long after he made that desecration in the temple, he died a very brutal death. I think I said that 2 or 3 weeks ago too when we talked about him. So there's always going to be a person raising up against the people of God to try and thwart God's plan, but we know they will never be successful. So if the Lord's decreed something, it's going to happen. Verses 29 through 35. This is the last section of contemporary times of Daniel, and then when we go into 36, it begins talking about the Antichrist. All right, 29 to 35. At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Okay, that's a kind of a familiar term there. The abomination that maketh desolate. And Jesus said, again, Matthew 24, when you see the abomination spoken of by the prophet Daniel. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flattering, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by the flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them wait, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Okay, so this is one of the most difficult chapters in Daniel to interpret, in my opinion. What I just wrote down here, the reason the majority of scholars reject this is because of the accuracy that Daniel has predicted events of the future. But once again, we as believers, we have no trouble believing that an all-powerful God is able to tell one of his servants what's going to happen, because he sees that he knows all things. So as we see Daniel accurately predicting these things, we can know for a certainty what the Antichrist will do based on the upcoming verses which we're about to read. So this whole chapter, or this whole book, Daniel, from a young boy to now an older man, has received visions and dreams. Some currently that happened that came to pass. Like, for example, when he saw the writing of the wall, he basically said, your kingdom's gone, and it happened that night. He told Nebuchadnezzar the upcoming kingdoms, and now as he's having these visions and dreams about Cyrus and Darius, these are events that are in the distant future, or not too distant future. But now, as he closes out verse 35, it says, it is yet for a time appointed. These last final verses from 36 through 45 are most agree are describing events that even today have not yet occurred, and now are describing the reign of the Antichrist. So first we'll divide this up into a couple of categories. 36 through 39. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. So this begin to sound more like future Antichrist. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall be honored the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall be honored with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. All right, most of our information about the future man of sin, or Antichrist, come from the book of Revelation, but here we have some, begin to have verses describing him in the book of Daniel, so we kind of put these two together. So who are they describing here? It says he speaks blasphemies, so that's what many have done in the past, but it really tends to emphasize this here. I wanted to see what it said here. Back to verse 36. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above every God, and speak marvelous things against the God of gods. So this really seems to point down who this person is. When it talks about him, will he regard the God of his fathers? Does this mean he'll be a Jewish person? From my personal studies, I've heard varying opinions. It does seem to lean toward that. I mean, because past people, who were the God of his fathers during this time period, basically the children of Israel, the only people who did worship the true God. Will he be someone who will bring peace to the Jewish people, and cause them to subtly, deceivably welcome him in, maybe build the new temple, sign the 7-year peace treaty, and then reveal his true identity? I believe it is possible. From what we have read in Daniel, it does seem this, and what we read in Revelation, it does seem to say that this world ruler will come from the Roman Empire, and they covered a long territory. So will he be Jewish? I don't know, but this one particular passage of Scripture makes me think that possibly he could be. We don't know for sure. It says you don't regard the desire for women. Does this mean he's a homosexual? Is it possible? Or does it just mean he's a ruthless leader? In today's world, especially for the women's movement and the cry out for equality among men and women, it's hard to believe he could get by with being a tyrant against them in today's world. But that's subject to interpretation. There's several. At the end of the class, we'll see if anyone else has any views on this. We have to analyze, all the prophecies about him in Daniel, Revelation, put them together and see what kind of person we've had. From what we have studied in those two books, it appears the Antichrist will come, like I said, from the former Roman Empire, but that covered a lot of territory, basically the known world almost at that time. But as I also said, based on these verses, this does suggest the possibility that he could be at least somewhat of Jewish heritage. And who is this person? Is he alive? Is he walking the earth now? Is he a young person? You can be sure, whoever he is, the stage are being set for him to come to power. And I can believe it can be a situation where he's just hardly known, and just like that, step right up to the plate. So let's close out this chapter with the final 6 verses and discuss a little bit more about his reign. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with a great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to an end, and none shall help him. So this eventually describes his eventual demise. All right, what are these closing remarks of the chapter? It describes what could be the final battle before the return of the Lord. They'll all gather into one place, most likely we believe to be in Jerusalem, where the Lord will return at, and then the end will come. What will be the fate of this man? As we read these final verses, it says, in the end he will be put down. Jesus will prevail. So the stage is set now in this chapter. Although it had described previously Antiochus, who was a spiritual type of the Antichrist, in the end it describes the future Antichrist, the actual one, and his destruction is foretold. And next week we'll go into the last chapter and kind of wrap up things here from the perspective. So in chapter 11, we have a description of future wars that are contemporary during the time of Daniel, a vivid description of the wicked Antiochus, the one who made the false sacrifice in the temple. And this false Antichrist is the spirit of Antichrist, who is kind of a figurehead or a future representation of the real Antichrist who will come. And we'll wrap things.